the way from the wilderness. The wilderness. Where is the wilderness in the world? Welcome to the show, by the way.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for having me. Along the garden route, that's where I am.
And you gave this just incredible webinar. I'm still thinking about it and blown away by it as well. Talking about the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic and what we can learn from history.
So we can see that it's this movement of people that has caused these great pandemics in the past. And that's where we can look at comparisons today. And of course, we're now at 1918, 100 years ago, and we can see the same kind of dynamic.
The Spanish flu was not synonymous. I mean, it's become synonymous with Spain.
The conservative estimate of the Spanish flu was a death rate of 50 million people. But scientists now are arguing that it could be up to 100 million people. But where did it start? It actually started there in America. Trump cannot call this couldn't have called this the Chinese virus, because it started in a military camp, would you believe, here, as you can see, on the 4th of March, 1918, in a place called Funston, Camp Funston in Kansas. Now, this was the first recorded case. Now, the soldiers that were preparing to leave for Europe in those last few months of the war were developing flu-like symptoms, fevers, headaches, respiratory problems, etc. But before they realized how serious this actually was, this was no ordinary flu. Those soldiers, a lot of them had already left for Europe and inadvertently spread this incredible virus with them. And that's how this emerged. So now we're looking at the spread of the coronavirus through travel and people moving between provinces. Then it was the war that caused this inadvertently, the spread of people on a mass scale.
Today in Georgia, here in the US, the governor has decided to allow people to get tattoos and get their nails done and get their hair cut, etc. And I thought it would be really important if you would talk a little bit about what happened with the Spanish flu here in the US with respect to opening up the states and the economy prematurely.
Yes, Joseph, I have clear examples of this. The one thing we must learn from the past, and certainly the events of 1918, is patience. If we come out of this lockdown, if we come out of this period of self-isolation and quarantine too early, we will effectively not kill this disease early. In fact, we can see, we'll talk about the second and the third waves that we experienced there that we're susceptible to today. If you look on the screen, that's a wonderful picture there during my research. These are police officers on the streets of Seattle. As you can see, they're using makeshift masks, as many of us do today. But we can look at how it was actually handled. By the time that the authorities realized that this was being spread by the soldiers, of course, the civilian population were being affected. But it was left to the individual cities to actually deal with it as they would. In a bit of the same way that Trump has now said to the different states, well, it's your decision. Perhaps that is not a very good, a very wise move. You were talking about how different cities handled it. Well, I can give you the example there of Seattle, which they did. They handled it quite well. In fact, they banned the homecoming parade after the First World War, unlike a place like Philadelphia, which didn't. Now, Philadelphia allowed the homecoming parade to take place. And within 2 weeks of that happening, 14,000 people had lost their lives. So this idea that you can just allow people to go back into big groups certainly is not a wise one. And we should learn from history. And as you can see from here on this current slide, we are looking at different spikes. Back in 1918 and 19, we also used graphs exactly as we're doing today. And some states and some cities and some countries learned that the longer they maintained this discipline and self-isolation, they were able to level this graph out. Whereas places, as I said, like Philadelphia, which didn't heed the warnings, they had a second spike because people returned to normality. And we can see from the headlines, public places are closed. So we're relying on the media, then the written word in newspapers, but today our TV, our internet, presentations like this to inform us. So it really does pay us to look back at different cases and different scenarios to learn what is best today.
I mean, I have the chills when I think about the fact that we're making the same mistake. Why can we not just figure out one solution, one clear way and path forward? The fact is, what we need is clarity and singularity and focus and prioritization. We need a plan.
This is the time when we do need clear, strong leadership from the top. We also saw what Donald Trump was talking about today. You could see the experts next to him. almost cringing with some of the information that was coming out. Now we need somebody to lead from the front and to give us guidance. And I don't.
This is not about politics. This is about leadership. And this is about education. And this is about learning from mistakes and never making them again. So, Jan said that he heard a book on the 1918, there was a book on the 1918 pandemic that so moved President George W. Bush, yes, George W. Bush, that he started the US's largest program to prepare for what would become the next big one. And he became almost obsessed on it, George W. Bush, and began planning for it. So Jan was asking, is this true? And I think you can work out what WTF stands for. What happened to that program?
Yes. Yeah, you're right. I mean, after we had this discussion earlier when we were preparing for tonight's show, I went back and had a look. And indeed, George W. Bush became quite interested with the Spanish flu, which I think all presidents should do. They should look at the past and learn how to deal with the present and the future. So in a post 9/11 world in 2005, he came up with the Bush plan, as it were, and it was the national strategy for pandemics. So the much maligned George W. Bush, but I think he actually did a lot of good. And perhaps, we maybe look to his leadership right now. But he put aside over $1 billion for this plan. And if we fast forward to Barack Obama in 2014, he maintained that strategy. In fact, it was the swine flu outbreak that led him to realize how important this was. So he put together a plan which he implemented within 11 days of the swine flu outbreak, which is interesting. So they were really effective. Now, fast forward now to what's been happening, of course, our present president of the United States, he decided to chuck all that out the window. So he decided not to follow that strategy. And he decided to ignore the, stockpiles of personal protective equipment and things like that. And he ordered states to provide their own. So in other words, he passed the buck on to the individual states. Now, Bush and Obama, albeit from different political spheres, as it were, agreed on one thing. Something as important as a national pandemic should be controlled at a national level. So we're not seeing that at the moment with America. So let's hope, and God forbid, we don't get a return to what happened, say, in Philadelphia and those cities that ignored the warnings.
Are you responding, and is your response as a supporter or a detractor of the current president, or is what you're saying from the perspective of a historian?
Listen, I want to take politics out of this discussion. I think something as important as this, I mean, everything is political, don't get me wrong, but this is from the perspective of having informed information. As I said, we're doomed to repeat the past if we do not learn from it. And that's exactly why I believe someone like myself, I mean, I'm a trained historian, I gather information and I build up an argument.
I heard a quote yesterday, actually, at a memorial service, at a Zoom memorial service, that said, if hope does not follow death, then death has been in vain. So if death brings us hope, then hope is what will steer us forward and to the future. I remain hopeful that we have the science and we have the medical expertise and we have the miracles of the intellect of this world together to figure out how to come together. So many of the things that you have on this chart give me hope and provide hope that we're not where we were all the way back 100 years ago.
To put it into context, they didn't even have penicillin at the outbreak of the Spanish flu in 1918. I mean, obviously that doesn't cure this, but it would help with secondary infections, etc. So we're now at a place where we can understand, because we've got those lessons from the past.
We're in a much better place to handle pandemic than we were 100 years ago, as I was saying. And you know what, you can take it from Joseph Jaffe, the host of Corona TV, or you can take it from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. We are in a better place. But let me ask you this question. Why don't we feel it? Why do we feel at times so lost and confused and scared? Why?
Well, we're all in that position. This virus affects everyone, absolutely everyone, regardless of your wealth, your status, your ethnic background. I mean, we saw the Prime Minister of Great Britain in intensive care the other week. I mean, this is something that affects us not just only physically, of course, mentally. I mean, it's quite a thing to lose our routine, to lose perhaps what we live for, which is our family connections and our job, and to actually be isolated, a lot of us unfortunately on our own. So I believe another thing that we have to be very, very careful of is our mental health at this juncture. But I think for the first time we realize how vulnerable we are as a human race, how the planet actually is the one in control, how we are now sitting back and we're having to take stock of where we are in our lives. And it's a philosophical point I'm making here, but I believe that to move forward, I hope there is going to be some changes for the good.
We have been felled as a race, as a human race. We have been reminded that we are not in control. And Greg just said it's high time we have serious truth and straight talk discussions. That's it. We've got to be able to tell the truth and talk the truth and acknowledge the truth. We don't need to sugarcoat or candy coat and create a false narrative. We've got to get real and we've got to get honest. And it's only through that honesty that we can actually figure out a way to pull through.
I know it's a serious subject to talk about on a Friday night, ladies and gentlemen, but I hope if you found any comfort from what I've said, you can see from the statistics that we have a lot worse than this. I mean, we're talking 100 years ago. We've been through 2 world wars. We've been through the HIV pandemic, swine flu, and things like this. So it's not the first time kind has faced this challenge. It just feels strange for us at the moment because we've lost our sense of control.
I want to thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your generosity, and for sharing this with the world today.
Well, Joseph, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute privilege, and I feel the energy through the screen. Joseph, what you're doing is magnificent, and I'll be tuning into Corona TV most evenings to get this daily dose of wisdom and upliftment, actually. So thank you.